What's up guys, Alex from FIFA Scouting Tips here, and welcome to part 2 of my FIFA 16 scouting guide. Today I'm going to be looking at where you can send your scout, where the best player is to go and find players, and whether nations specialise in certain player types. So not every country costs the same to scout. For example, scouting in a low yield country like China for example will cost you £43,000 for a 9-month trip. But if you were to go scouting in a high yield country, somewhere like Argentina for example, that would cost you £259,000 for a 9-month trip. That's because different regions have a different chance of finding platinum players. These are the best tier of youth players that you can find. So right now I've put on screen a list of the best places to scout in the game with the scores that the game gives each region in brackets. This is based on the chances they have of producing platinum players. The scores aren't out of 100 or anything, they're just relative to each other. So the best places to scout are Argentina and Brazil with a score of 15. Then it's Italy, Spain and Portugal which have a score of 14. And then it's the Central Europe region which has a score of 13. However, I wanted to see how this played out in practice, so I hired two 5-star scouts and sent one to Brazil and one to Saudi Arabia. I sent them both out for 6 months to search for the any player type. The trip to Brazil cost £173,000, while the trip to Saudi Arabia cost £29,000, so it would be good to see which one would be the more worthwhile. So these are the results. I came back with 7 Saudi Arabian players and 9 Brazilian players. The lowest potential Saudi Arabian player had a range of 73 to 81, and the highest potential Saudi player was 82 to 88. Meanwhile, the lowest potential Brazilian player had 75 to 81 potential, and the highest potential Brazilian player had 79 to 89. So it was pretty close between both of them. While in theory Brazil has a much better chance of finding high potential players, in practice you may not notice it. I found almost as many high potential players in Saudi Arabia, which is basically one of the worst players you can scout supposedly, as in Brazil, just from picking the best players in each report. I didn't reload any reports, these are just the first time results I got from all my reports. Over the course of 1,000 scouting trips you may notice a difference, but over the course of 6 months it's entirely possible that you won't. I often get asked questions like, where should I scout to find fast players? Or, I want a strong striker, where should I scout? And although different countries do specialise in different player types, the answer isn't quite as straightforward as saying go scout here or go scout there. As with finding platinum players, the game scores each region on its likelihood of finding certain player types. On screen now I've put a list of the best places to scout each player type. If you're looking for fast players, scout Japan, China and the rest of Asia for example. I've put a full breakdown of each player type and how each region ranks on FIFAscoutingtips.com, so make sure you check that out to see where you should send your scouts. But again, I wanted to see how this played out in practice, so I hired 3 5-star scouts and sent one each to Ghana, Spain and Argentina. I told the scouts to look for any players or the any player type, because in theory the scout in Ghana would find lots of physically strong players, the scout in Spain would find lots of fast wingers, and the scout in Argentina would find technically gifted players. I picked only the best players on the reports, and here is what I found. There are 7 Ghanaian players, 5 Spanish players and 4 Argentinian players. Of the Ghanaian players, 4 are physically strong, 2 are wingers and 1 is an attacker. There were 2 Spanish attackers, 1 technically gifted player, 1 physically strong player and 1 playmaker. Then there was 1 technically gifted Argentinian player, 1 defensive minded, 1 physically strong and 1 playmaker. So it's kind of a mixed bag really. On the one hand, Ghana did well in the areas that the game says it should specialise in, like physically strong players and wingers, but on the other hand, scouting in Spain and Argentina brought back a much wider range of player types. However, the game code specifies that these nations should produce more of their respective player type specialities, not that these player types will necessarily be the best players they find. So Spain could well produce an abundance of fast players, but it could be that on your scouting reports its goalkeepers end up being the best players and the ones that you sign. So you'll find lots of fast wingers, but they may not be very good. Just because a nation will produce more of a certain player type, that doesn't mean that that player type will be the best one on your reports. So while nations do specialise in player types, you're not guaranteed to find the player type they specialise in, like loads of amazing attackers in Brazil for example. The next thing I want to look at is whether a scout can find better players by scouting in his home nation, and it appears that this year that is not the case. In previous FIFA games, your scout would have a slightly better chance of finding top rated players if he looked in his own country. However, after much research I can find no evidence of that in FIFA 16. I did test this though. I hired two 5-star scouts, one Italian and one French. sent the Italian one to Italy, his home nation, for 6 months, and I sent the French one to Spain for the same period of time. Both Spain and Italy have an equal chance of finding top rated players, so I thought this would be a good way of testing whether the home nation boost exists. I did a load of tests, and in most tests that I did, the results were broadly similar. Each scout found roughly the same number of high potential players, whether or not they were scouting in their home nation. On this particular test, I ended up with 7 players from Italy and 6 from Spain. The quantity of top players was about the same, as was the quality. Like I said, this was broadly the case in all the tests I did, and I can find no evidence of the home nation boost after rooting around in the game. So as long as you have a good scout, you've got a good chance of finding great players, as there doesn't appear to be a home nation boost. There's one other thing that I want to add, and that is that reloading your reports still helps. Basically, if you get a report and you don't like any of the players that your scout has found, you can quit your save, reload it, and advance to the next save, and you'll be presented with a fresh list of players. So let's just say that I don't like any of these players, and I don't want to sign any of them on. I just got to quit the save, and then reload it straight away, and I'll get a different set of players. And it's very good if you just save the day before you report. You can quit and reload very, very quickly, and it's much easier than having to sim forward a lot. So we'll sim forward the next day and look at our new reports, and we'll have a different list of players, and some of these have got very good potential, so we can sign those players up. This has an impact on where you scout, because it means that with enough reloading you can find amazing players anywhere. If your finances are super tight, then it may be a good bet to send your scout somewhere cheap, then reload your reports until you find good players. Of course, it could take a long time and a lot of reloading to find world beaters in the lowest rated countries, but it is possible. So that is it for my look at where you should send your scouts in FIFA 16 and what nations are best at producing what types of players. I hope it's been useful. If you found out anything yourself and want to share it, make sure you leave it in the comments, and if you've got any ideas and suggestions for what I should do next, make sure you share that as well. Head over to FIFAscoutingtips.com, where I'll have the full article for this, where I've expanded on it a bit more, shown all the rankings for the different nations and what they specialise in, all that kind of stuff, so make sure you check that out. Like I said, if you've got any suggestions for what you want me to do, keep that coming as well. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. But I've been having bad luck with the impact engine all game, and look at that. Nice little pirouette from Wallace there.